Imagine walking into a world where you don't belong, a room filled with elegance, wealth, and power, voices blending into a polished harmony of confidence and status. Crystal glasses clink softly, laughter echoes with certainty. Every movement, every word, every glance seems rehearsed in a language you were never taught, and there you are, present, but invisible. This is where the story of Peter Schlemiel begins. He is not a hero in the traditional sense. He is not powerful, not respected, not even particularly noticed. He is simply a man standing on the edge of a world he desperately wants to enter. A man who believes, like many of us, that if only he had the right opportunity, the right resources, the right moment, everything would change. And then that moment arrives, but not in the way he expects. Among the well-dressed guests, there is a figure who does not quite fit, a man in gray, calm, composed, observing more than participating. There is something unsettling about him, not because he draws attention, but because he doesn't need to. He sees Peter, truly sees him, and in that quiet recognition, an offer is made, simple, clean, almost absurd in its simplicity. In exchange for his shadow, Peter will receive a purse that never runs out of gold. Pause there for a moment. A shadow, something we never think about, something that follows us silently, without demand, without effort. It holds no obvious value. It cannot be traded, spent, or used, and yet it is always there. So when Peter is asked to give it away, the decision feels easy, too easy, because what is a shadow compared to endless wealth? And that is where the story reveals its first truth. The most dangerous deals are the ones that seem harmless. Peter accepts. And just like that, everything changes. At first, it feels like a dream unfolding exactly as he imagined. The gold flows endlessly. He no longer has to hesitate, calculate, or worry. Every desire can be fulfilled instantly. Every door that was once closed now opens. People notice him, they respect him, they welcome him. For the first time in his life, Peter Schlemiel feels seen, but something is wrong. At first, it is subtle, a glance that lingers too long, a whisper that cuts through the air just enough to be felt but not fully heard, a hesitation in someone's step as they approach him. Then it becomes clearer. People are not reacting to his wealth. They are reacting to what is missing, because Peter Schlemiel has no shadow. And in a world where shadows are as natural as breathing, this absence is not just unusual, it is disturbing, unnatural, unacceptable. And just like that, the same society that welcomed him begins to reject him. Not openly at first, not with direct confrontation, but with something far more powerful: distance, avoidance, fear. Because a man without a shadow is not just different, he is something other, something that does not belong. This is where the illusion begins to break. Peter tries to ignore it. He convinces himself that the gold is enough, that acceptance will return, that people will adjust, but they don't. Because there are some things money cannot fix. He changes his behavior. He avoids sunlight so his condition won't be noticed. He moves carefully, strategically, always aware of how he appears. But the more he tries to hide it, the more obvious it becomes. And slowly, painfully, the truth emerges. He did not just sell his shadow. He sold his place in the world. The shadow, as it turns out, was never just a shadow. It was a symbol, a quiet, constant proof of his humanity, his existence within the natural order, his connection to everything around him. Without it, he is incomplete, and people can feel that incompleteness, even if they cannot explain it. This is the second truth the story reveals. There are parts of who we are that cannot be removed without consequence, parts that define not just how we see ourselves, but how the world sees us. And when those parts are gone, no external success can replace them. Peter's wealth becomes meaningless, not because it loses its power, but because it cannot solve the problem he created. He has everything he thought he wanted, and yet he cannot live freely. He cannot love freely. He cannot exist without fear of being discovered. And then something inevitable happens. He falls in love. Because even in isolation, even in confusion, the human desire for connection does not disappear. It grows. He meets someone who sees him, not for his wealth, but for something deeper. For a moment, it feels like redemption, like maybe, just maybe, he can still have a normal life. But love demands truth, and truth is exactly what Peter cannot offer. Because how do you explain the absence of something everyone else takes for granted? How do you build a life with someone when a fundamental part of your existence is missing? And so the relationship collapses, not because of a lack of feeling, but because of a lack of wholeness. This is where the story becomes painfully real, because it is no longer about magic. It is about the consequences of a single decision, a decision made in a moment of temptation without understanding its weight. And just when everything seems lost, the man in gray returns, calm, patient, unchanged, as if time has no effect on him, as if he knew this moment would come. He approaches Peter not with pressure, but with certainty, because he understands something Peter did not at the beginning. Desperation creates opportunity, and so he makes a second offer. Peter can have his shadow back. He can return to society. He can live normally again. He can love, belong, exist without fear. Everything can be restored. But this time, the price is different, higher, final, his soul. And here, everything slows down, because this is no longer a simple trade. This is a defining moment. The first deal was made in ignorance, in desire, in a lack of awareness. But this one is made in full understanding. Peter knows exactly what he stands to lose, and for the first time, he hesitates. This hesitation is everything, because it represents growth, awareness, the painful clarity that only comes from experience. He has seen what happens when you give away something essential. He has lived the consequences, and now he stands at a crossroads. One path leads back to comfort, acceptance, normalcy. The other leads to continued isolation, but with something intact, something invisible, but invaluable, his soul. And so he refuses. No deal, no negotiation, no compromise. It is a quiet decision, but it carries more weight than anything that came before it. Because in that moment, Peter chooses who he is, not who he appears to be, not who society wants him to be, but who he truly is. And in doing so, he reclaims something he thought he had lost: control. This is the turning point of the story, not because Peter gets what he wants, but because he understands what matters. He walks away, not as the man he was at the beginning, but as someone transformed by loss, by failure, by realization. From that point on, his life takes a different direction. He does not return to society. He does not chase acceptance. He does not try to rebuild the life he lost. Instead, he chooses a path that few would choose willingly: solitude. But this solitude is not empty. It is purposeful, with the help of magical boots that allow him to travel across vast distances. Peter becomes an explorer of the world, not in search of wealth, but in search of understanding. He studies nature, he observes, he learns. He shifts his focus from external validation to internal growth. And in this shift, something remarkable happens. He finds meaning. Not the kind that comes from status or approval, but the kind that comes from alignment, from living in a way that does not betray who you are. This is the final truth the story offers. Redemption does not always mean returning to what was lost. Sometimes it means building something entirely new, something deeper, something real. Peter Schlemiel never regains his shadow. He never fully re-enters society. He never becomes the man he once hoped to be, but he becomes something else, something arguably greater, a man who understands the cost of his choices, a man who refuses to repeat his mistakes, a man who chooses integrity over comfort. And that is his victory, because in the end, the story is not about a shadow, it is about value, about recognizing what matters before it is too late, about understanding that not everything can be replaced, and that some losses are not meant to be reversed, but to be learned from. Peter's journey forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. What are we willing to trade for the life we think we want? Time, principles, authenticity. How often do we convince ourselves that something is small, insignificant, disposable, just because we cannot immediately see its importance? And how often do we realize its value only after it is gone? The man in gray represents more than temptation. He represents opportunity without reflection, shortcuts without consequences, at least at first. But the story reminds us that consequences always come, not always immediately, not always obviously, but inevitably, and when they do, they reveal the true cost of our decisions. Peter Schlemihl's story is not meant to scare us away from ambition or success. It is meant to challenge how we pursue them, to ask whether the path we take aligns with who we are, or whether, in the process of gaining everything we want, we are slowly losing something we cannot afford to give up. Because in the end, the most valuable things in life are often the ones we cannot see, the ones we do not measure, the ones we assume will always be there until they're not. And when they're gone, no amount of wealth, power, or success can bring them back. So the question is not whether opportunities will come. They will. The question is, will you recognize the true cost before you say yes? Or will you, like Peter Schlemihl, only understand the value of what you had after it has already been traded away?